My son called me and said he wouldn't come home unless I signed my house over to him. Those were the exact words he used. I remember the moment like it was frozen in time. My coffee had just finished brewing, the morning sun was coming through the kitchen window, and I was thinking about baking his favorite apple pie for when he visited that weekend. Then my phone rang. I smiled when I saw his name on the screen. "Hey, sweetheart," I answered warmly. But the voice on the other end wasn't the boy I had raised. It was cold, sharp, impatient. "Mom," he said flatly, "I'm not coming home anymore." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. "Don't be silly, Ethan. What do you mean you're not coming home?" There was a long pause. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "I'm serious. I'm not coming back, unless you sign the house over to me." For a moment I thought I had heard him wrong. "My house?" I whispered. "The one you've been living in for 40 years? "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "That house." I felt the air leave my lungs. That little blue house wasn't just a house. It was the place where I raised him, where his father painted the nursery before Ethan was born, where we celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, scraped knees, and school graduations. It was my whole life. And my own son was asking me to give it away like it was nothing. "Ethan," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady, "why would you ask me something like that?" He sighed loudly, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Because it makes sense. I'm your only son. Eventually it's mine anyway. Just transfer it now." My hands started trembling. "But honey, if I give you the house, where would I live?" Another pause. Then he said something that broke my heart more than the demand itself. "You'll figure it out." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. For 72 years I had faced a lot in life. I buried my husband. I worked 2 jobs to raise my son alone. I sacrificed vacations, clothes, even medical treatments, sometimes just so Ethan could go to college and build a good life. And now that same boy was telling me I could figure it out. "Mom," he continued impatiently, "I'm staying with Lily now anyway. So don't expect me to show up unless the house situation is handled." Lily. Of course. Ever since that girl came into his life 6 months ago, something had changed. My Ethan used to call every Sunday. Now weeks passed without hearing from him. He used to ask my advice. Now he barely listened when I spoke. And every time I asked about Lily, he got defensive. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, Mom," he'd say. But something about her always made my chest feel tight. Not because I didn't want him happy, but because I'd seen that kind of smile before. The kind people wear when they want something. "Think about it," Ethan said before hanging up. "Call me when you're ready to do the paperwork." Then the line went dead. Just like that. I sat there staring at the phone for a long time. The kitchen felt quieter than it ever had. My son had just given me an ultimatum. My home. Or my relationship with him. And like any mother, the thought of losing my child terrified me more than losing walls and furniture. For the next 2 days, I barely slept. I kept looking at old photos of Ethan as a little boy. The one where he's holding his first baseball glove. The one where he fell asleep on the couch with cookie crumbs all over his shirt. The boy who used to run into my arms after school and say, "Mom, you're my best friend." Where had that boy gone? And how did I lose him to someone like Lily? By the 3rd night, I made a decision. If signing the house over was the only way to bring my son back into my life, then maybe I would do it. Maybe a mother sometimes has to sacrifice everything. So the next morning, I called a lawyer to start the paperwork. But just as I was about to sign the documents that would give away the home I had built my entire life around, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. "Hello," I said cautiously. The man on the other end sounded nervous. "Ma'am, my name is Daniel." There was a short silence. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I'm Lily's ex-boyfriend, and you need to hear the truth about what she's doing to your son." My hand froze above the paper, because what he told me next changed everything. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. My son wasn't just making a mistake. He was being played. And if I didn't stop it soon, he was about to lose everything, including me. But what Daniel revealed about Lily's past, was far worse than anything I could have imagined. And when I heard the full story, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just going to save my son. I was going to teach that girl a lesson she would never forget. But first, I had to hear the truth. And trust me, what Daniel told me next still gives me chills. When the man on the phone said he was Lily's ex-boyfriend, I felt a chill run through my entire body. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear faint traffic in the background on his end of the line, like he was standing outside somewhere, maybe pacing back and forth while trying to gather the courage to call a stranger. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Why are you calling me?" I asked cautiously. The man took a slow breath. "Because," he said, "I think your son is about to make the same mistake I did." My grip tightened around the phone. "What mistake?" Another pause. Then he said something that made my heart start beating faster. "Trusting Lily." I glanced down at the stack of documents on my kitchen table. The papers that would transfer my home into Ethan's name. The ink pen was still in my hand, hovering above the signature line. "Listen," the man continued, his voice low and serious. "I know this sounds strange, but I heard from a mutual friend that Ethan moved in with Lily recently, and that he's been talking about getting money from you." My stomach dropped. "How would you know that?" "I still have friends in the same social circle," he explained. "And when I heard your name come up, I knew exactly what was happening." The way he said it made something deep inside my chest tighten. "What do you mean you knew?" I asked. There was a long silence on the line. Then he spoke again. "Mung, Lily has done this before." I leaned back slowly in my chair. "Done what before?" "Convince men to cut off their families," he said quietly, "so she can get access to their money." My mind immediately rejected the idea. "No," I said firmly. "My son isn't stupid. He would never let someone manipulate him like that." The man gave a small, sad laugh. "That's exactly what I used to say too." The kitchen suddenly felt colder. "What's your name?" I asked. "Daniel." "Well, Daniel," I said slowly, "if you're going to accuse someone of something like that, you'd better explain." And that's exactly what he did. "About 2 years ago," Daniel began, "I met Lily at a party in Chicago. She was charming, funny, beautiful. The kind of woman who makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. I could picture it easily. Lily had that kind of presence. She moved in with me after 4 months," he continued. "At first everything was perfect. She cooked dinner, helped decorate my apartment, talked about our future together." Daniel paused before adding quietly, "And then she started planting ideas." "What kind of ideas?" I asked. "That my parents didn't respect me, that my sister was jealous of our relationship, that everyone around me was trying to control my life." My heart started pounding harder. "Little by little," Daniel said, "she convinced me to distance myself from them. Stop answering their calls. Stop visiting during holidays." I felt a sickening sense of familiarity creeping up my spine, because Ethan had started doing the exact same things. Then Daniel said the words that made my hands go completely numb. "Eventually she started asking about my money." I stared at the table. "My savings, my investments, my condo." "What happened?" I whispered. Daniel let out a heavy breath. "She convinced me to refinance my condo and put the money into a business idea she claimed she wanted to start." My chest tightened. "And did she?" I asked. "No." Silence filled the line. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "She disappeared 3 weeks after the money transferred." For a moment I couldn't speak. "You're saying she stole from you?" "Yes." "And you're telling me she's trying to do the same thing to my son?" "I'm not guessing," Daniel said quietly. "I'm sure of it." I stood up from the table and walked slowly toward the living room window, staring out at the maple tree my husband had planted 35 years ago. "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked. "I tried," he replied. "But technically the money transfer was voluntary. Everything was signed legally." "Of course it was. People like that always made sure the trap looked legal." "Look," Daniel continued, "I'm not calling to cause trouble. I just heard Ethan was pressuring you to transfer your house to him. And I recognized the pattern immediately." I swallowed hard. because suddenly everything Ethan had said on the phone started echoing in my head. Sign the house over. I'm not coming home unless you do. I'm staying with Lily anyway. My hands began to shake. Daniel, I said slowly. Are you absolutely certain about this? I wish I wasn't. Another silence fell between us. Then he added something unexpected. And I'm not the only one she's done it to. That made me straighten immediately. What do you mean? There were 2 other guys before me, he said. Different cities. Same story. My heart began racing. How do you know that? Because after she disappeared with my money, I started digging. I felt a strange mixture of fear and anger building inside me. And what did you find? That Lily has a pattern, he said. She targets men who have something valuable: money, property, inheritance. I slowly looked down at the paperwork on my table again. My house. Then Daniel said the sentence that changed everything. And right now your son is her next target. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Because if what he was saying was true, Ethan wasn't just being manipulated. He was being set up, used. And when Lily got what she wanted, she would leave him exactly the way she left Daniel. Broken, alone, and ruined. I pressed my hand against my chest and whispered, my son would never believe this. Daniel's voice softened. I know. So what am I supposed to do? Another pause. Then he said something that surprised me. We expose her. I frowned slightly. How? Daniel's voice became calmer, more focused. Because I still have proof. The word proof made my heart skip. What kind of proof? Messages, he said. Bank transfers. Photos. And something else that might interest you. I waited. Then Daniel spoke again. I have recordings of Lily talking about her plans. My heart nearly stopped. What plans? The ones involving your son. A heavy silence filled the line again. Then he added quietly, if you want to save Ethan, we need to act fast. I looked at the house around me. The photos. The memories. The life I had built. Then I looked at the papers that would have given everything away. And for the first time since Ethan's phone call, something inside me changed. The scared mother inside me stepped aside. And the woman who had survived 72 years of life finally stood up. All right, Daniel. I said firmly. Tell me exactly what we need to do. Because if that girl thought she could trick my son and take my home, she clearly didn't know one important thing about me. I might be a grandmother, but I wasn't weak. And if Lily wanted to play games, then she had just picked the wrong family. But what Daniel revealed next about Lily's plan made me realize the situation was even worse than we thought. And when I heard the full truth, I knew this wasn't just about protecting my house anymore. It was about saving my son's life. And the trap we were about to set for Lily was going to expose everything. When Daniel said he had recordings of Lily talking about her plans, my entire body went still. For a moment, I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing. Recordings? I repeated slowly. Yes, Daniel said. And not just one. I walked back to the kitchen table and sat down again, staring at the legal papers that would have given my house away only minutes earlier. If Daniel hadn't called when he did, everything would already be gone. Daniel, I said carefully, I need you to tell me the truth about something. Of course. Why are you helping me? There was a pause on the line. Then he answered in a quiet voice. Because I know what it feels like when someone destroys your life like that. His words carried a weight that felt very real. I lost my home, he continued. My savings. My relationship with my parents. Lily didn't just take money from me, she took years of my life. The pain in his voice wasn't dramatic or loud. It was calm. The kind of calm that only comes after someone has already gone through the worst. And when I heard she was doing the same thing again, he added, I couldn't just sit back and watch another family get destroyed. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Well, I said softly, I'm glad you called. Because the truth was, without that call, I would have already signed those papers. I looked again at the place where my signature was supposed to go. My hand had been seconds away from giving my entire life away. And for what? For a son who believed I was the problem. For a woman who had probably been whispering lies into his ear for months. "Daniel," I said firmly, "tell me about those recordings." He took a breath. "A few months before Lily left me, I started noticing strange things," he explained. "She would talk about people in a very calculated way, like everyone around her was just a piece on a chessboard. That didn't surprise me. Lily always seemed too perfect, too smooth, like she was always performing. One night," Daniel continued, "she got drunk at a friend's party, really drunk, and she started bragging. My heart started beating faster. Bragging about what? About how easy it was to manipulate men. I felt my stomach twist. What exactly did she say?" I asked. Daniel hesitated for a second. Then he said quietly, "She said men were predictable, especially men who wanted to feel important." A cold feeling spread through my chest. She said all you had to do was make them feel like heroes, then slowly convince them their families didn't understand them. My mind immediately flashed back to Ethan's voice on the phone. "You don't support my decisions, Mom. You always judge my choices." Those weren't words my son used to say. Those were words someone had planted. Daniel continued speaking. "She told one of her friends that older parents were the easiest targets." My hand tightened around the phone. "Why?" I whispered. "Because they feel guilty," Daniel said. "Because they'll sacrifice anything to keep their children happy." For a moment I couldn't say anything. Because he was right. That was exactly why I had almost signed those papers. "I started recording conversations after that," Daniel said. "At first I thought maybe I was imagining things." "And were you?" I asked quietly. "No," he replied. His answer was immediate, firm, and completely certain. "What did you hear on those recordings?" I asked. Daniel took another breath. "One night she was talking to a friend on the phone," he said. "She didn't know I was home." My heart was pounding now. "And she said something that made everything clear." "What?" Daniel's voice dropped lower. "She said she was already looking for her next opportunity." A chill went through me. "Her friend asked what she meant," he continued. "And Lily laughed." My stomach tightened. "What did she say?" Daniel spoke the words slowly. "She said, 'Men with houses are the best.'" The kitchen suddenly felt very quiet. "Why houses?" I asked. "Because houses mean leverage," Daniel explained. "Once the man gets the property, she convinces him to refinance, sell it, or put her name on it." My eyes slowly moved across the walls of my home. Every corner of that house held a memory. Every room carried pieces of my life. And that girl had been planning to take it all. Then Daniel added something that made my heart sink even deeper. "The last recording I have," he said quietly, "is from about 3 weeks ago." My breath caught. 3 weeks ago? Yes. "And what did she say?" There was a long pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice sounded heavier. "She mentioned your son." I felt like the floor had shifted under my feet. "What exactly did she say about him?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. "I'm not sure you're going to like hearing it." "I need to hear it," I said firmly. He sighed softly. "All right." I gripped the phone tighter as he began speaking again. "She told her friend that Ethan was perfect." "Perfect?" I repeated. "Yes. She said he was emotional, loyal, and desperate to prove himself." That sounded painfully accurate. "And then," Daniel continued, "she said something else." My heart was racing now. "What?" "She said his mother owned a house." The words hit me like ice water. "And?" I whispered. Daniel's voice turned quiet again. "And she said getting that house would be easy." For a moment, the world around me felt distant. My son, my home, my family, all of it had become part of someone else's plan. Daniel broke the silence. "I'm sending you the recordings," he said. "You need to hear them yourself." A second later my phone buzzed with a message notification. The files had arrived. I stared at them for several seconds before pressing play. The room filled with Lily's voice. And within the first 30 seconds, my heart shattered. Because the way she talked about my son wasn't love. It wasn't even respect. It was strategy. Cold, calculated, and cruel. When the recording ended, I sat there in silence for a long time. Then something inside me finally changed. The sadness that had been weighing on me for days slowly turned into something else. Something stronger. Anger. I picked up the phone again. "Daniel," I said calmly. "Yes. You were right about one thing." "What's that?" "This isn't just about my house anymore." There was a pause. Then he asked quietly, "What are you thinking?" I looked around my home one more time. Then I said the words that would start everything. "I think it's time we show my son who Lily really is." Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he said something that made a small smile appear on my face. "I was hoping you'd say that." But what we were about to do next wasn't going to be simple. Because if we wanted Ethan to see the truth, we needed Lily to expose herself. And to make that happen, we were going to have to build the perfect trap. And trust me, the plan Daniel suggested next was something that girl would never see coming. After listening to Lily's voice on those recordings, something inside me changed in a way I can't fully explain. For 2 days I had been a frightened mother, afraid of losing her son. But now I understood something very clearly. My son wasn't my enemy. He was the victim. And the real problem was the woman whispering poison into his ears. I sat at my kitchen table long after the recordings ended, staring at the quiet room around me. The walls of that house had seen my entire life unfold. My husband had carried me across the living room when we first moved in. Ethan had taken his first steps on that very floor. This house wasn't just property. It was family. And I wasn't going to let someone like Lily steal it. Not from me. And not from my son either. My phone was still in my hand when Daniel spoke again. "So," he said carefully, "what do you want to do?" I leaned back in my chair. "I want the truth to come out," I said slowly. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." "But how?" I asked. Daniel paused for a moment before answering. "Lily has a weakness." "What's that?" "Greed." The word hung in the air between us. "She always pushes too far," Daniel continued. "That's how she got caught with me." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "She rushed the plan," he said. "She tried to get the money too quickly." I thought about Ethan's ultimatum again. "Sign the house over or I'm not coming home." Yes, that sounded rushed. "That means we have an advantage," Daniel said. "Which is?" "She thinks she's winning." I slowly nodded. That was true. As far as Lily knew, I was an old woman who was scared of losing her son. She believed I would do anything to keep him in my life. And unfortunately, she wasn't completely wrong about that. "What do you suggest?" I asked. Daniel hesitated slightly before answering. "We give her exactly what she wants." I blinked in surprise. "You want me to sign the house over?" "No," he said quickly. "I want her to think you will." I sat quietly for a moment, considering that idea. "You mean pretend?" I asked. "Exactly." The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. "If she believes the house is coming," Daniel continued, "she'll drop her guard. And then she'll start planning the next step." "Which is?" I asked. Daniel's voice turned serious. "Getting the house out of Ethan's name and into hers." My stomach tightened. Because suddenly I could see the whole picture clearly. Lily wasn't just manipulating Ethan. She was using him as a bridge. Once the house belonged to him, she would find a way to take it from him too. "That's how she works," Daniel said. "She isolates the man from his family, gets access to his assets, then disappears." I rubbed my temples slowly. "My son is going to be devastated when he realizes this," I whispered. "I know," Daniel replied gently. "But it's better he finds out now than after he loses everything." He was right. Still, the thought of Ethan looking at me with anger and disappointment made my chest ache. "What do we actually do?" I asked. Daniel took a deep breath. "First," he said, "you call Ethan." My heart skipped. "And tell him what?" "Tell him you've thought about what he said, and you're ready to transfer the house." For a moment, my instincts screamed against the idea. Every motherly instinct wanted to beg him to come home instead. But I understood the situation now. If we wanted Lily to reveal her real intentions, she had to believe she had already won. "All right," I said quietly. I'll do it. Good, Daniel replied. And when you talk to him, make sure Lily hears the conversation. I raised an eyebrow. How am I supposed to control that? Daniel chuckled softly. Trust me. If she's anything like I remember, she'll be listening. That didn't surprise me at all. So what happens after that? I asked. Daniel's voice became more focused. Then we wait. For what? For Lily to make her move. I frowned. What kind of move? The kind that exposes everything. I didn't like the uncertainty in that answer. But Daniel sounded confident. You're sure about this? I asked. Yes, he said firmly. I took a slow breath. All right. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through my phone contacts and found Ethan's name. For a moment I just stared at it. The same name I had saved in my phone for nearly 40 years. My little boy. The child I used to hold in my arms when he had nightmares. The teenager who once told me I was his hero. Now he barely spoke to me. I pressed the call button before I could change my mind. The phone rang twice. Then he answered. Hello. His voice sounded distant. Cold. Hi, sweetheart, I said softly. There was a short pause. What do you want, Mom? The sharpness of his tone hurt more than I expected, but I pushed the feeling aside. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him. And I swallowed hard. I'm ready to transfer the house to you. For a second there was complete silence. Then Ethan spoke again. Seriously? Yes. His voice immediately changed. The warmth that had been missing for weeks suddenly returned. Well, that's good, he said quickly. That's really good. I closed my eyes for a moment. The sudden shift told me everything. Come by tomorrow, I continued calmly. We'll talk to the lawyer together. There was a short pause again. Then Ethan said something that confirmed Daniel had been right all along. Actually, Lily and I can come tonight. I slowly opened my eyes. Of course. She didn't want to wait. Tonight is fine, I said. Great, he replied quickly. Then I heard something faint in the background. A woman's voice. Lily's voice. Ask her about the paperwork, she whispered. Ethan lowered his voice slightly. Mom, you're not going to change your mind again, right? My heart twisted. No, I said gently. I won't change my mind. Another pause. Then he said, we'll be there in an hour. The call ended. I set my phone down slowly. Daniel spoke quietly from the other end of the line. She was listening, wasn't she? Yes. And she's excited? Very. Daniel let out a slow breath. Good. Good. I repeated. Yes. Why? His answer sent another chill down my spine. Because when greedy people think they've won, that's when they make their biggest mistakes. I looked around my house again. In 1 hour, Ethan and Lily would be walking through my front door. And Lily would believe she was about to secure her biggest prize yet. But what she didn't know was that every step she took tonight was leading straight into a trap. And the moment she realized it, my son would finally see the truth. But there was just one problem. Because what Lily did the moment she arrived at my house was something I never expected. And it made the entire situation far more dangerous than we planned. Exactly 57 minutes after Ethan hung up the phone, headlights appeared in my driveway. I was standing near the living room window when I saw the car pull in. My heart started pounding immediately. For a brief moment, I wasn't thinking about traps or recordings or plans. I was thinking about my son, the little boy who used to run through this same driveway with scraped knees and muddy sneakers. Now he was sitting in a car with a woman who was trying to tear our family apart. The engine shut off. 2 doors opened. And then I saw them. Ethan stepped out first. He looked tired, thinner than the last time I had seen him. His shoulders were tense, like he had been carrying something heavy for weeks. Then Lily stepped out of the passenger side. And the moment I saw her expression, my stomach tightened. She was smiling. Not a warm smile. Not the kind someone gives when they're visiting family. It was the kind of smile people wear when they believe they've already won. I stepped away from the window just as the doorbell rang. For a moment I stood there in silence, steadying myself. Then I walked over and opened the door. Ethan was standing there with his hands in his pockets. Hi, Mom, he said. His voice sounded awkward, almost cautious. Before I could respond, Lily leaned slightly forward beside him. Good evening, she said sweetly. Her tone was smooth and friendly, but her eyes immediately moved past me, scanning the house behind my shoulder. That was the first thing I noticed. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the house. Well, I said quietly, stepping aside. You'd better come in. They walked inside together. Ethan looked around the living room like he hadn't seen it in years. But Lily's eyes were moving in a very different way. She was studying everything. The staircase, the walls, the furniture, the windows. Like someone mentally calculating value. Nice place, she said casually. I almost laughed at that. She had been here dozens of times before. But tonight she was looking at it differently. Tonight she was looking at it like it might belong to her soon. Ethan cleared his throat. So you said you talked to the lawyer? Yes, I replied calmly. And the paperwork is ready. I watched Lily's face very carefully when I said those words. Her smile widened just a little. Not enough for Ethan to notice. But enough for me. Great, Ethan said quickly. He sounded relieved. Almost eager. And for a moment I realized something that hurt more than I expected. My son truly believed this was a victory. He thought I had finally come around. Why don't we sit down? I suggested. We moved into the dining room where the documents were waiting on the table. Lily's eyes immediately locked onto the papers. She walked over like a magnet had pulled her there. Those are the transfer documents? She asked. Yes. She leaned slightly closer, scanning the top page. You've already filled everything out? Almost. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down. Well, let's finish it then. His voice carried excitement now. I noticed Lily standing behind him, resting one hand lightly on his shoulder. The gesture looked affectionate. But the way her fingers tightened slightly, it looked more like control. Before we sign anything, I said calmly, I want to talk about something. Ethan sighed immediately. Mom, we already talked about this. No. Quietly. We didn't. Lily tilted her head slightly. What would you like to discuss? She asked politely. Her tone was perfectly sweet, but something about the way she asked it felt rehearsed. I folded my hands on the table. I want to make sure Ethan understands what owning this house means. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? It means responsibility, I said. Taxes, maintenance, insurance, repairs. That's fine, he replied quickly. I can handle that. I nodded slowly. Of course you can. Then I looked directly at Lily. And what about you? Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Me. Yes, I said gently. You'll be living here too, won't you? For the first time since she walked in. She hesitated. Just for a second. Well, eventually, she said. Eventually. Not if. Not maybe. Eventually. That single word told me everything. Ethan didn't seem to notice. But I did. And you're comfortable with Ethan owning the house? I asked. Of course, she said smoothly. Not in your name? She laughed softly. Oh goodness, no. That would be ridiculous. The answer came too quickly. Too perfectly. But Daniel's recordings echoed in my head. This was exactly how she operated. First the man gets the property. Then she works on the next step. I leaned back in my chair. All right then, I said calmly. Good, Ethan said, reaching for the pen. But before his fingers could touch it, my phone rang. The sound cut through the room like a knife. All three of us looked down at the screen. Daniel's name appeared. My heart skipped. Because we had agreed he wouldn't call tonight unless something was wrong. Excuse me, I said quietly, picking up the phone. I stepped into the kitchen and answered. Daniel. His voice sounded urgent. They're there already? Yes. There was a short pause. Then he said something that made the blood drain from my face. You need to be careful. Why? Another pause. Then he said the one sentence I never expected to hear. Lily knows someone has been talking about her. My heart started racing. What do you mean? I just heard from a friend, Daniel said quickly. She's been asking questions today, trying to figure out who contacted you. A cold feeling spread through my chest. She thinks someone warned you. I glanced toward the dining room where Ethan and Lily were waiting. So what does that mean? I whispered. Daniel's voice turned serious. It means she might already suspect something. My pulse quickened. That's not good, I said. No, he replied. Then he added something that made my stomach drop completely. Because if Lily thinks she's being exposed, she might do something desperate. At that exact moment, I heard a chair scrape loudly in the dining room, and Lily's voice floated into the kitchen. Ethan, doesn't this feel a little strange to you? My heart started pounding harder, because the tone in her voice had completely changed. It was no longer sweet. It was suspicious. And the way she said it told me one thing very clearly. She was starting to realize something wasn't right. But what Lily did next was something none of us had prepared for. The moment I walked back into the dining room, I could feel the tension in the air. It had changed. Just minutes earlier, Lily had been relaxed, almost smug, as she stared at the paperwork on the table. But now something in her posture was different. Her shoulders were stiff, and her eyes were studying Ethan carefully. Everything okay? I asked calmly as I placed my phone back on the table. Ethan looked between us. Yeah, he said, though he sounded uncertain. Why? But Lily didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. Her eyes moved from the paperwork to me, then back to Ethan. It's just strange, she said finally. What is? Ethan asked. This whole situation. I sat down across from them, keeping my face neutral. What do you mean? Lily crossed her arms slightly. Well, think about it, she said. 2 days ago your mom refused to transfer the house. Now suddenly everything is ready and she wants to sign tonight? Her eyes landed directly on me. That's a pretty big change. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Well, maybe she just thought about it, he said. I nodded gently. That's exactly what happened. But Lily wasn't convinced. I could see the calculation behind her eyes now. The confident smile she had worn earlier was gone. In its place was something colder, something more alert. The look of someone trying to figure out if they were being outplayed. You said you spoke to a lawyer, Lily said slowly. Yes. Which lawyer? The question caught Ethan off guard. Lily, he said quietly. Why does that matter? She gave him a small smile. I'm just curious. But the curiosity in her voice sounded more like suspicion. I leaned back in my chair. Mr. Harris, I said calmly. The name came out easily. Because earlier that afternoon Daniel and I had actually called a lawyer friend of his to prepare temporary documents for the plan. Downtown office, I added. Lily studied my face for a moment. Then she glanced at Ethan again. Did you see the documents already? She asked him. No. Ethan replied. I just got here. Lily picked up the top sheet of paper and started reading carefully. Every few seconds her eyes flicked toward me, then toward Ethan. She wasn't just reading. She was checking, looking for mistakes, looking for anything that didn't make sense. After about 30 seconds, she placed the paper back on the table. Well, she said slowly, it looks legitimate. I almost smiled. Looks legitimate. Ethan reached for the pen again. Great, he said. Then let's just finish this. But Lily placed her hand gently on his arm. Wait. Ethan frowned. What now? She leaned closer to him, lowering her voice slightly. Don't you think it's moving a little fast? His eyebrows pulled together. You were the one pushing for this, he said. Her expression didn't change. I just think we should be careful. For the first time that night, I saw confusion on Ethan's face. Careful about what? Lily hesitated. And in that moment, I realized something very important. She wasn't sure what was wrong. She just felt that something was wrong. Predators develop instincts like that. But instincts aren't proof. I'm just saying, she continued carefully. Maybe we should have a lawyer present when you sign. Ethan sighed. Mom already talked to the lawyer. Yes, Lily said, glancing at me again. But we weren't there. The room grew quiet. I could almost hear Daniel's voice in my head. When greedy people think they've won, that's when they make mistakes. But Lily wasn't greedy in this moment. She was cautious, which meant the trap had to tighten slowly. I understand your concern, I said gently. Lily turned toward me again. But if Ethan doesn't trust me enough to accept the house from me, I continued softly, then maybe this whole conversation was a mistake. Ethan's head snapped toward me. Mom, that's not what I meant. I pushed the papers slightly away. Maybe we should forget it, I said quietly. Ethan immediately reached forward. No, that's not necessary. Then he turned toward Lily. It's fine, he said. She's my mother. For a moment, Lily looked like she might argue again. But then something changed. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. The staircase, the windows, the backyard door, and suddenly, that confident smile returned. All right, she said sweetly. Ethan blinked. All right, yes. She picked up the pen and handed it to him. Go ahead. Something about the way she said it made my skin prickle. It was too calm, too easy, almost like she had just made a decision. Ethan took the pen, clearly relieved. Great. He looked at the signature line. Then he glanced at me. Are you sure about this? For a brief moment my heart softened. Because underneath all the tension and manipulation, that was still my son. Yes, I said gently. He nodded, and slowly lowered the pen toward the paper. But just before the tip touched the page, Lily suddenly spoke again. Actually, she said lightly, there's one more thing. Ethan groaned. What now? Her eyes moved directly to me. I'd like to see the title documents for the house. The request landed like a stone in the middle of the room. Ethan frowned. Why? Lily shrugged casually. Just to confirm everything. But I knew exactly what she was doing. She was testing the situation, looking for any crack in the story. And unfortunately for her, Daniel and I had prepared for that too. I slowly stood up from the table. They're upstairs in my office, I said calmly. I'll get them. Lily nodded politely. Thank you. I walked toward the staircase, my heart beating faster with every step, because now the trap was tightening. And if everything went according to plan, the next thing Lily would see would be the one thing she never expected. Proof. Real proof of everything she had done. But what happened when I opened my office door upstairs was something that made my heart nearly stop, because sitting on my desk was an envelope I had never seen before, and written across the front of it were 5 terrifying words. You should not trust Daniel. When I stepped into my office and saw that envelope sitting on my desk, my heart nearly stopped. It hadn't been there earlier. I knew that for a fact. I had been in this room only 2 hours before when Daniel and I were going over the plan on the phone. The desk had been completely clear except for my laptop and a small stack of bills. But now, there was a white envelope sitting directly in the center, and written across the front in thick black marker were 5 words that made my stomach drop. You should not trust Daniel. For a moment, I just stood there staring at it. My first instinct was that it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it was junk mail someone had slipped through the mail slot earlier, and I had carried it upstairs without noticing. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't true. Something about the way it was placed felt deliberate, like someone wanted me to see it. My mind immediately started racing. Who could have put it there? Ethan and Lily had only arrived a few minutes ago. They hadn't been upstairs. I had been with them the entire time, which meant the envelope had been placed here before they arrived. And that thought made my chest tighten. Because if someone had entered my house earlier, that meant they had been inside without me knowing. Slowly, I walked toward the desk. Each step felt heavier than the last. I picked up the envelope and turned it over in my hands. There was no stamp, no address, nothing. Just those 5 words. You should not trust Daniel. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and the moment I unfolded it, my heart began pounding even harder. Because it wasn't a letter. It was a printed photograph. A photograph of Daniel. But he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was Lily. The picture looked like it had been taken inside a cafe. Daniel and Lily were sitting across from each other at a small table. They appeared to be talking seriously. For a few seconds, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Daniel had told me he hadn't spoken to Lily in years. So why were they together in this picture? I flipped the photograph over. On the back, someone had written another message. Ask him when this was taken. A cold wave of doubt washed over me. Was Daniel lying to me? Had this whole thing been some kind of setup? Maybe Lily wasn't the manipulator. Maybe Daniel was. Maybe he had called me to create conflict between Ethan and Lily for some reason I didn't understand. My heart started racing faster. Downstairs, I could faintly hear Ethan and Lily talking in the dining room. They were waiting for me. Waiting for the title documents. But now my mind was spinning in 100 different directions. What if Daniel had tricked me? What if those recordings were edited? What if I was about to destroy my relationship with my son based on lies? For a moment, I considered calling Daniel right then and there. But something stopped me. Because the more I looked at the photograph, the more something about it felt strange. Daniel looked younger in the picture. His hair was shorter. And the clothes he was wearing didn't look recent. Slowly, a different thought crept into my mind. What if this photograph was old? What if someone had sent it specifically to confuse me? My eyes moved back to the message on the envelope. You should not trust Daniel. But the question that suddenly felt more important was this. Who wanted me to believe that? Because whoever had left that envelope clearly knew about Daniel, which meant they knew about the plan. And if they knew about the plan, then the situation downstairs was far more dangerous than I thought. Just then, I heard footsteps on the staircase. My head snapped toward the door. Someone was coming upstairs. My heart started hammering in my chest. I quickly slid the photograph back into the envelope and placed it inside my desk drawer just as the footsteps reached the hallway. A second later, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Mom. His voice sounded impatient. What's taking so long? I forced a small smile. Just looking for the documents. He leaned against the doorframe. Lily's getting restless. I nodded slowly. I'll be down in a second. He looked around the office briefly. Then he shrugged and turned back toward the stairs. As soon as his footsteps faded again, I closed the drawer and took a deep breath. Something very strange was happening. Someone had entered my house earlier. Someone who knew about Daniel. Someone who wanted me to doubt him. But right now, I couldn't focus on that mystery. Because downstairs, the real danger was waiting. I grabbed the title documents from the filing cabinet and walked toward the door. My heart was beating harder with every step. Because one thing was becoming very clear. The trap Daniel and I had planned was already in motion. But now there was a new question hanging over everything. Was Daniel really on my side? Or was I walking straight into someone else's game? I walked back downstairs and placed the title documents on the table. Lily immediately leaned forward. Perfect, she said with a satisfied smile. But when she opened the folder and started reading, her expression changed instantly. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she looked up at me. And the way she said the next sentence made the room feel 10 degrees colder. Mrs. Carter, she said slowly. Why does this document say the house isn't fully in your name? The moment Lily said those words, the entire room went quiet. Ethan immediately looked up from his chair. What do you mean it's not in her name? He asked, confused. Lily slowly turned the document toward him and tapped the page with her finger. Right here, she said. It says the property is jointly protected under a survivorship clause. Ethan leaned closer, reading the paragraph. His eyebrows pulled together. Mom, what is this? For a brief moment I didn't answer. Because Lily had just accidentally stepped into something she didn't understand. And the look on her face told me she was already trying to calculate what it meant. I folded my hands calmly on the table. It means exactly what it says, I replied. Ethan looked up again. But I thought the house was yours. It is, I said gently. But not entirely. Lily's eyes narrowed slightly. Then whose name is on the title with you? She asked. The question came out faster than she probably intended. Too fast. Too eager. Ethan noticed it too. He glanced between us. Yeah, Mom, whose name? I took a slow breath. There's a trust. Ethan blinked. A trust? Yes. I could practically hear Lily's brain working now. Because people like her understood money structures very well. But what she didn't know yet was that this one had been created a very long time ago. Your father and I set it up years ago, I explained quietly. Ethan sat back in his chair. You never told me that. That's because it wasn't necessary. Lily spoke again. So the house can't be transferred directly? Her voice sounded calm, but the tension in her posture told me she already suspected the answer. Not without the trustee's approval, I said. Ethan looked confused again. Who's the trustee? I watched Lily carefully when I answered. Daniel. For a split second, the mask fell off her face. It was subtle. Very subtle. But I saw it. Shock. Real shock. Then she recovered quickly. Daniel. Ethan repeated. Yes. My son frowned. Who's Daniel? Lily didn't say a word, but her body had gone perfectly still. The man who helped your father and me set up the trust years ago, I replied. That wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough to keep the plan moving. Ethan looked even more confused. So you're telling me, even if you sign these papers, the house still needs approval from some guy? From the trustee, yes. Lily suddenly leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked angry, not suspicious, not curious, angry. Well, that's inconvenient, she muttered. Ethan turned toward her. What do you mean? She forced a small smile. I mean, it just complicates things. But I knew what she was really thinking. Complications meant delays. Delays meant risk. And risk meant losing control of the situation. I stood up slowly from the table. Well, I said calmly, if this arrangement makes everyone uncomfortable, we can simply forget the whole thing. Ethan looked frustrated. Mom, no, we already came this far. But Lily didn't look convinced anymore. She stared at the documents again. Then something changed in her expression. Something calculating. Actually, she said slowly, maybe this isn't such a bad thing. Ethan looked confused again. What do you mean? Lily folded her hands neatly on the table. It means we should meet this Daniel person. My heart skipped slightly. Oh, I said. Yes, she continued smoothly. If he's the trustee, then he should be part of the conversation. Ethan nodded. That makes sense. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost 9. Daniel and I had already discussed the possibility of meeting Ethan later, but we hadn't planned for Lily to request it so directly. Daniel lives nearby, I said carefully. Great, Lily replied immediately. Then let's call him. Her confidence had returned again, and that worried me, because predators only become confident when they believe they're regaining control. Ethan looked at me expectantly. Can you call him? I hesitated for a moment, then slowly picked up my phone. Sure, I said. I stepped into the kitchen again and dialed Daniel's number. He answered on the second ring. Everything okay? He asked quietly. They want to meet you. There was a short pause. Tonight? Yes. Another pause. Then he sighed softly. Well, I guess it's time. You're sure about this? I whispered. Yes. His voice sounded calm, confident. Let her think she's in control, he added. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. All right. When I walked back into the dining room, Lily was leaning close to Ethan, whispering something in his ear. The moment she saw me, she straightened again. Well, she asked. He's on his way. Ethan looked relieved. Perfect. But Lily's reaction was very different. She smiled. Slowly. The kind of smile someone gives when they believe the final piece of a puzzle is about to fall into place. And suddenly I understood what she was thinking. She believed meeting Daniel would expose the lie. She believed he would contradict my story. And when that happened, she would turn Ethan completely against me. The room felt heavier as we waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Finally, headlights appeared through the front window. Daniel had arrived. Ethan stood up from the table. Good, he said. Let's settle this. Lily stood beside him, her arms crossed. But when the doorbell rang, I noticed something strange. Her eyes weren't nervous. They were excited, like she had been waiting for this moment all night. I walked to the door and opened it. Daniel stepped inside. He looked calm, relaxed. But the second Lily saw him, her entire expression changed. Not to anger, not to fear, to recognition, real recognition. And the word she said next made Ethan freeze. "Daniel," she said slowly. "Long time no see." The room went completely silent. Because in that moment, everyone realized one thing. They definitely knew each other. But what Ethan said next was the moment the entire truth finally started to explode. The moment Lily said Daniel's name, Ethan's head snapped toward her so fast it looked like it hurt. "Wait," he said, staring between them. "You two know each other?" For a second, nobody spoke. The air in the room felt thick, like a thunderstorm was about to break. Daniel stepped inside slowly and closed the door behind him. He looked at Lily with a calm expression. The kind of calm that only comes from someone who has already been through the worst and survived it. "Yes," he said quietly. "We've met before." Ethan frowned, clearly confused. "You never told me that," he said to Lily. Lily shrugged lightly, though the small twitch in her jaw told me she was no longer as comfortable as she had been 10 minutes ago. "Well," she said casually, "it was a long time ago." Daniel let out a small breath through his nose. "Not that long." The tension in the room tightened immediately. Ethan looked between them again. "Okay, someone better explain what's going on." For a moment, Lily tried to take control again. She stepped forward slightly and crossed her arms. "Daniel and I dated briefly," she said, her tone cool and dismissive. "Years ago." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "That's one way to describe it." Ethan blinked. "What does that mean?" Lily shot Daniel a sharp look. "It means we didn't work out." But Daniel didn't look away. "No," he said calmly. "It means you disappeared after draining my bank account." The words landed like a bomb in the middle of the room. Ethan's eyes widened. "What?" Lily laughed suddenly. A loud, sarcastic laugh. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head. "Are you serious right now?" Daniel didn't react. "Yes." Lily turned to Ethan, rolling her eyes dramatically. "See, this is exactly why I didn't bring him up before. He's obsessed with me." Ethan looked uncertain now. "What are you talking about?" Daniel reached into his jacket pocket slowly. "I'm talking about this." He pulled out his phone. Then he placed it on the dining table and pressed play. The room filled with Lily's voice. Her real voice. The one I had already heard upstairs earlier that evening. "Men with houses are the best," the recording said clearly. "Once they trust you, everything else is easy." Ethan's face went pale. Lily's expression froze. For a moment nobody moved. Then Lily snapped forward and grabbed the phone. "This is fake," she said immediately. But Daniel had already started another recording. "His mom owns the house," Lily's voice said again from the speaker. "Once it's transferred, I'll figure out the rest." Ethan slowly turned toward her. His face looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from under him. "Lily," he whispered. Her eyes moved rapidly between Daniel, the phone, and Ethan. "That's edited," she said quickly. "He's manipulating the audio." Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he calmly opened a folder he had brought with him. Inside were printed bank statements, emails, messages. He slid them across the table. "I brought receipts," he said. Ethan stared down at the papers. The silence in the room felt unbearable. Lily suddenly slammed her hand on the table. "This is insane." She looked directly at Ethan. "Are you really going to believe this guy over me?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He kept reading. Then he picked up one of the papers. "What's this?" he asked slowly. Daniel answered calmly. "That's the transfer where $30,000 left my account." Ethan flipped to the next page. "And this? That's the message where she convinced me to do it." Lily shook her head aggressively. "This is ridiculous." But the confidence in her voice was fading. Ethan finally looked up at her. And the hurt in his eyes made my chest ache. "Lily, just tell me the truth." For a moment she didn't speak. Then she laughed again. But this time it sounded forced. "You're being manipulated," she said. But Ethan's voice was different now. Colder. "Did you say those things in the recordings?" She hesitated. And that hesitation lasted just long enough. Ethan slowly leaned back in his chair. "Oh my God," he whispered. The realization was hitting him piece by piece. I could see it in his face. The late-night arguments with me. The pressure to get the house. The threats. All of it suddenly looked different. Lily saw it too. And for the first time since she walked into my home, I saw fear in her eyes. "You're making a mistake," she said quickly, grabbing Ethan's arm. "He's lying." But Ethan gently pulled his arm away. "Then why do you know him?" he asked quietly. Lily opened her mouth, but no answer came out. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "That's not even the worst part," he said. Lily's head snapped toward him. "Don't," she warned. But Daniel ignored her. He turned to Ethan. "You should ask her about Chicago." Ethan frowned. "Chicago?" Daniel nodded. "The guy before me." Lily's face went completely pale. "Daniel." But he continued calmly. "His name was Mark." Ethan slowly turned toward Lily again. "Is that true?" She didn't answer. And that silence said everything. Ethan pushed his chair back suddenly and stood up. The sound echoed through the house. "I left my own mother's house for you," he said, his voice shaking. Lily stepped toward him quickly. "Ethan, listen." But he backed away. "No." For the first time all night, my son looked at me. Really looked at me. And the pain in his eyes nearly broke my heart. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I stood up slowly. "You didn't know," I said gently. Lily looked around the room now like an animal searching for an escape. "This is insane," she muttered. But the confidence was gone. Daniel crossed his arms. "You're done, Lily." For a second, the room was silent again. Then Lily suddenly laughed. But this time, the laugh sounded different. Not embarrassed. Not defeated. Dangerous. She looked at all three of us. Then said something that made my stomach twist. "You really think this changes anything?" Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Lily's smile slowly returned. And when she spoke again, her voice was colder than I had ever heard it. "It means you're all about 10 minutes too late." Daniel's expression changed instantly. "Too late for what?" Lily looked directly at me. And the next words she said made my heart drop into my stomach. "You might want to check your backyard." Because what Ethan saw when he ran outside a few seconds later was something none of us had expected. And in that moment, we realized Lily's plan had been far bigger than just stealing my house. The moment Lily said those words, Ethan didn't hesitate. He rushed toward the back door and threw it open so hard it slammed against the wall. Daniel and I followed right behind him, our hearts pounding as we stepped into the backyard. The night air felt cold against my face, but the scene in front of us made my chest tighten even more. A tow truck was sitting at the edge of my driveway, and attached to the back of it was Ethan's car. The driver was already lifting the front wheels off the ground. "What the hell?" Ethan shouted as he ran forward. The man operating the truck looked confused. "Relax, buddy," he said. "I'm just doing my job." "My job is towing this vehicle." Ethan looked stunned. "Who told you to tow my car?" The driver pointed casually toward the house. "The lady inside." Behind us, Lily slowly walked out onto the porch. Her arms were folded, and that same cold smile had returned to her face. "You shouldn't leave important things in someone else's name," she said calmly. Ethan turned toward her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Lily shrugged lightly. "The car lease." Ethan froze. "You transferred the lease?" "Last month," she replied. Daniel's voice turned sharp. "You forged his signature?" Lily laughed again. "Oh, please." He signed the documents himself. Ethan's face went pale as the memory suddenly hit him. The paperwork Lily had asked him to sign weeks ago. The forms she said were for insurance updates. He had never read them carefully. And now his car was being driven away right in front of him. The tow truck driver finished securing the vehicle. "Sorry, man," he said to Ethan. "I've got a legal order." Then the truck slowly pulled away. Ethan stood there in the driveway watching his car disappear down the street. For the first time since he arrived that night, I saw something break inside him. Lily stepped down from the porch and walked toward the gate. "Well," she said casually, "this has been fun." Daniel stepped in front of her path. "You're not walking away from this." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and how exactly are you going to stop me?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Then he handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "Your mistake." Lily frowned slightly and opened it. Inside were several printed documents. As she read them, the color slowly drained from her face. "What is this?" she whispered. Daniel crossed his arms. "It's a copy of the police report." Her eyes snapped up toward him. "Police?" He nodded calmly. "Yes." Then he pointed toward the street. Because at that exact moment, red and blue lights turned the corner. A police car pulled up in front of my house. Lily's confidence finally cracked. "You called the police?" she said sharply. Daniel shook his head. "No." Then he nodded toward me. "She did." The officer stepped out of the car and walked toward us. "Evening," he said. Then he looked directly at Lily. "Miss, we received a report about financial fraud and identity manipulation." Lily tried to recover quickly. "This is ridiculous," she said. But Daniel handed the officer the folder containing the recordings, messages, and financial documents. "We've been collecting evidence for months," he explained. The officer looked through the pages briefly. Then he turned to Lily again. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us." For a moment Lily just stood there, silent. Then she looked at Ethan. Not with love. Not even with anger. Just frustration. "You were supposed to be smarter than this," she said. Ethan didn't respond. The officer gently took her arm and guided her toward the patrol car. As the door closed behind her, the street fell quiet again. The flashing lights slowly faded as the car drove away. Ethan stood in the driveway for a long time without speaking. Finally, he turned toward me. His eyes were red. "Mom," he said softly. "I'm so sorry." I walked over and placed my hand on his shoulder. "You came home," I said gently. "That's what matters." For a moment he looked like the little boy he used to be again. Daniel cleared his throat nearby. "Well," he said with a small smile, "I think that problem is officially solved." Ethan looked at him. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Daniel nodded. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Next time someone tries to rush you into signing something, read it first." For the first time that night, Ethan laughed a little. And as we walked back into the house together, I looked around the living room again. The same walls. The same memories. The same home that had almost been stolen from us. But not tonight. Tonight something much more important had happened. My son had learned the truth. And the woman who thought she could manipulate our family had finally learned something too. Because some people believe older mothers are weak. That they're easy to fool. Easy to pressure. Easy to control. But Lily made one very big mistake. She forgot that mothers, especially grandmothers, will do anything to protect their children, even if it means setting the perfect trap. And trust me, that's a lesson she will never forget.